know more about
Hmm. We got to start.
Arian might know more about than I do, but it is that with these 27 lots that are being abandoned, if in fact the owners decide to do a buyout, the 27 houses or properties for buyout, there are restrictions on those bought out properties after they have been uh, purchased by FEMA, and those restrictions include that no changes can be made to the river corridor. So it's going to be my question. I don't think anybody's here who can answer it, but some of the things that we might think would be desirable from the point of view of river corridor improvement would probably all have to be done before the buyout occurred. And that's going to be very tricky because already those individual properties are owned by individual people. So zoning regulations applied to a river corridor may not be enforceable in the buyout corridor, excuse me, in the bought out properties because they can't even, they can't be altered except to allow the river to have its own course. I don't know if I made myself clear, but we can't like for instance armor a riverbank in that area. A bought out property cannot have an armored uh, riverbank to protect it from erosion. You can't do any erosion controls at all in the bought out properties.
Uh,
I don't.
this
Yeah.
is this is Sandy speaking. I don't know if this helps, but Northfield did a pretty extensive buyout program after Irene, and I think even if it were armored beforehand, whoever quote restores um, the whole floodplain area will probably take any armored areas out, and they make an attempt to restore it. And the good news at Northfield was in 2023 they didn't have any appreciable flooding at all, from what I heard. So the restoration program really worked.
That's helpful. We do right now. Our other group, our planning group, excuse me, our funding group is looking at the fact that actually some things may be worsened in the lower village as a result of the changes, and we're going to be having that evaluated shortly in terms of perhaps more flooding occurring just upstream from the Mill Street Bridge. That still remains to be seen.
I see a hand up, Philip. Yeah,
No, it's
please.
actually, hi, it's
Yeah,
Alicia
yeah.
Rice. Yeah. Hi, Cynthia. Long time no see. We worked together years ago. Okay, I actually have two questions. They're related, and that's about what we've lost. Earlier, you said, Will, and I appreciate your candidness and I appreciate this meeting, that depending on how you look at it, we've lost about 11% of the grand list for that's not available for taxes. Can you explain what you mean depending on how you look at it and what are the variety of ways to look at it? That's the first question.
Yep. Hey, Sandy. I'm going to get my wife in here. She's the head lister.
Uh,
Okay,
okay.
hang on.
This feels like a Woody Allen movie.
About the loss of grant value.
Without Manhattan.
She's coming. She gave me that number, so she said. I said, you abated value, and you can't. You can't abate value. You can only abate taxes. So here she is.
Hi.
Hi.
So what?
So the question was, how did the 11% loss of grand list value come about?
Right.
Was,
What Will actually originally said was depending on how you look at it, we've lost about 11% of the grand list in terms of availability for taxes. And that implies that there are other ways to look at it. And I'm just would like a framework by which to understand this.
we actually did not lower the grand list at all because we are not by law permitted to in July. The flood was the week before the tax bills were going out. And for the tax year, we have to do what's in place on April 1st. So we could not take into consideration anything that happened in the flood in terms of sending out tax bills. We couldn't say your house was destroyed, therefore we're not taxing it. So what we did was we tried to estimate what the damage lost was in terms of value. And we had about, I think was 26 properties that were identified that week that we had the information for. And we just used the value of the parts that were lost on those properties. There were a few that it was completely lost. There were a few that there was this kind of damage or that kind of damage. We're not allowed to decrease acreage because of a flood. That, again, is the law. The land still exists. It's just either in a different place or it's under the brook.
Water.
Right, but the acreage still exists. So, people would say, but I lost my whole back 5 acres. Well, the law says you didn't. But we tried to take into account what the impact was on the grand list because it was very, very clear that we did not want to send out tax bills to people who had just lost everything and now had to pay a 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever it was, $1,000 tax bill. So we took into consideration that, and we used some of the FEMA money that we were expecting from last year to help offset our expected, because we still had to raise a certain amount of money that was voted in the budget on town meeting day. So what we did was essentially we took into account some of that loss, and therefore, in order to raise the same amount of money, everybody else's tax rate went up a little bit. Well, everybody's tax rate went up a little bit, but then we were expecting, after the tax bills went out, that we were going to abate the taxes on those properties. And we figured out all those numbers, and this was what we expected. It didn't necessarily come out to be exactly that. So the value that we figured was lost on the grand list, and it was just to help calculate what we were going to do about abating taxes for the 2024 tax bills, was about $1 million or a little bit more. It came out to be 10 or 11% of the total grand list.
Okay, thank you. I think my second question may be more for Will, but perhaps you, Jesse, someone else can chime in. I keep hearing disparities in the numbers of houses we've lost. I saw 18, with your map of the houses that have been lost, 18 in the village. Then I think Michael said 27. How many did we actually lose? And if we've lost 20, and then I've heard 37 from somewhere, that's what we need to replace in the expansion. So I'm just really puzzled, mystified about the disparity in the number of residents lost.
As the current town volunteer buyout coordinator, I can answer that pretty definitively. We have lost 20, if all the buyouts are admitted, we will have lost 27 buildings that contained 37 housing units. So those are why those numbers are different, because, for example, the Heartbreak apartment building had 8 units in it. So,
okay. Okay, that does explain it. Thanks.
I see a hand raised, John.
John Hosford.
Yes.
I had a comment and a question.
Sure.
The comment being, the last time I saw the proposed language for this, especially in the village expansion area, it said that it needed to meet the feel of the existing village, something like that. That's awfully squishy language in my mind, and opening the town to lawsuit because your idea of what the village feel in mine is totally different as everybody else in this meeting. I haven't seen it recently, so I could be totally wrong. And then the real question I had was, does Plainfield have any controls on short-term rentals, because selling 10th acre lots is prime for someone to come in and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to put a bunch of little houses, tiny buildings, yurts, whatever, and I'm going to rent them out for Verbo or Airbnb, and that's not what we want in the village.
I can answer. We do have a provision that short-term rentals are conditional use and they have to meet certain requirements of occupancy. And let me just see if I can find that definition of a short-term rental in the definition here. But yes, we see that as an issue, and the zoning document doesn't say the feel of the village. The town plan mentions that, and that's what some of the responses to some of the surveys mention.
Oh, I can totally agree with it. I feel like
that's
if
not
that's
legal language.
codified, yeah, if that's codified,
No, wouldn't do that. Yeah. Short-term rental is the rental of a portion of an entire dwelling unit on an overnight or short-term basis of less than 30 days at a time and for no more than 90 days in a calendar year.
Okay.
Or
Nice.
So yes, we do have some control over short-term rentals.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Will.
Sure. So I guess we're at that sort of opening it up to some questions. Cynthia, did you raise your hand again, or?
Yes. I have a couple questions. I wondered if you had any designs yet for the proposed area for development. I really appreciated the information that was given out. And for example, there was something on pocket neighborhoods. And, I think these are very interesting. I really want to appreciate the work that people are doing and thinking about how to keep our village live and expanding it. So I'm wondering, okay, so that is one thing. I want to say I appreciate the idea of like a common area that different houses open onto, and maybe the access is through behind, like driveways. Anyway, I don't know whether you have those designs yet, but I wanted to appreciate that and ask if there were more thinking going on. And then the second question I had is, do we know anything about what Goddard intends to do?
I'll let Arian mention about some of the design meetings that are coming up for the village expansion project. But I can address a little bit what Mike is thinking of at Goddard just from the brief conversations I've had with him. And he, as a developer, doesn't want to build new buildings. He wants to renovate the existing buildings and put them up for different uses, some of which are continuing some of the projects and educational things that were existing at Goddard. So he doesn't have any firm plans, but there's a cafeteria at Goddard, and a couple of years ago they opened it up to the public, and it was a great place to go have breakfast. But he couldn't do that under the existing zoning. We have to. That's why that property should be in the village. So
Can I, excuse me, I didn't put my hand up. It's Michael. I just wanted to add that Mike has expressed, and his strategic planning person has expressed that the Greatwood Dormitory Complex would potentially be renovated into 2-family or 4-family units, maybe retaining the basement subfloor and then building a new structure on top of it that was more energy efficient and more suitable to multifamily use. So I just throw that specific out for Cynthia's sake.
Thanks.
Yeah, he's got some plans, but he's got it's going to take a little while for a lot of them.
And I'm sure Arian did the same thing I'm about to do. I just wanted to say, I think you'll find a lot of information about the village expansion project on their website, which Arian just posted in the chat. So
Yeah,
I bet you can find a lot of what you're looking for there.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. And just right at the top, it'll say there's 2 upcoming informational meetings next week, next Thursday, at the Opera House, and also the following Sunday. And then there's going to be a community design workshop on February 8th. So there's a lot of opportunities to come and learn more about that project, and then on February, in February, participate in the design process. So thanks for the question and the interest.
And maybe I could just give a little bit of context for like this meeting and how it relates to these questions. You know, as the Planning Commission, we're charged with, reviewing and updating the zoning regulations, which are, a body of legal language that sort of define how people can and can't build within the town of Plainfield. And it was, among many other things, the flood included, and then this village expansion project, they sort of, as we were routinely, and we've been working on this for several years, but as we were routinely in the process of revising the zoning regulations so that the select board and then the town could approve them, we were looking at what was happening in these projects and realizing that there were some of the elements of the zoning regulations that could use updating, in part to help facilitate a project that felt very relevant. There's some overlap in the conversation between where we're at as the Planning Commission and then where this project is, that's kind of under the purview of the Village Expansion Committee. So I just wanted to kind of make that point in case people were a little bit unsure about what, these separate kind of packages are.
Yes, they're linked, but they're not. There's a certain amount of separation that we want to maintain. We want to have the zoning enable stuff. And the village expansion project and the NDA application are 2 of those things that we want to enable and help the town move forward, and the Goddard addition to the village district. I see another hand raised. Yeah,
That's me. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't cutting it on someone else who would
Nope.
also raise their hand. One term people have heard me talk about this and the expansion project, or have seen postings I've made, will be familiar with, is the notion of unintended consequences. And I resonated with John's question about, can we put a max on development, on the number of units that can be built on a lot, 1/10 of an acre, 1/5 of an acre, and also the question of the broader question of what sort of control the town would have on what was built once a lot is sold. Because my understanding is the town wants to buy the land for the expansion project, and I know they're separate entities, but what you do here will extend and influence what happens with the expansion project. So once the lot is sold to a buyer, is there anything to prevent them from putting up a very, very, very high density building? I mean, to be somewhat extreme, we don't want to become another Williston. I think people may share that view. Perhaps you don't. But what sort of controls does the town have on what goes up and the number of units built on any lot once it's sold to a buyer?
Well,
I mean, I would say as like sort of sexy as this sounds, I think the best answer to your question is in the zoning regulations. And I would really encourage you to read the definitions for what restrictions there are for someone to build in the different zones within the town of Plainfield. And you'll see that there's 4 zones that each have a totally different set of constraints. And we're talking a lot about the village zone because that's the zone where the village expansion project is looking to happen. And it's the zone where we've propose this reduced density. But I think it's actually it's not terribly complicated. It's basically the size of a lot, and then within it, there's things like setbacks from a road, setbacks from adjacent properties, and there's a whole area restricting people from doing things that are in, flood hazard zones and so on and so forth. But the general answer, I think, is in those definitions. And it's not fun reading, but it's actually pretty accessible if you dig into it.
I have read some of it. I perhaps did not understand the application in that sense. So if I'm understanding you correctly, they're within those setbacks and the adjacent acreage and other constraints. There is something language that precludes someone buying a quarter-acre lot and putting up 20 units. Is that true? Because you multiply that by many, many lots, and you've got a mini Williston.
The question, we were discussing that earlier, and that would be density.
Mhm.
And we don't have a density requirement right now. We want to have a density that's close to the existing village, which includes some apartment buildings. And it's a complicated question. In theory, someone could buy those lots and put apartment buildings on because the multi-unit, the state requires that multi-unit families under the Home Act, the recently passed act, are a permitted use in the village. You can't restrict that. So in some ways, the state is overriding some of what the town could enforce. It says that you can't do more restrictive than this.
Correct.
So I think that's, there are limits to what the town can do under that new legislation. And that's something that I don't think we quite have a handle on just yet. So we're gonna leave it to the state regulations at the moment and see if we can come up with something that works for Plainfield and also meets the requirements of this, that doesn't go against the requirements of the state. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Will.
Okay, thank you. Grace, you said you had your hand up?
Yes, hi, this is actually Liz. We're sharing an iPad.
Okay, we can only go by the name.
Liz Bicknell.
Yeah.
My question is a little bit similar to the previous one in that it possibly deals with unintended consequences. And I'm wondering about the balance of commercial property versus residential property. So the area would be zoned for commercial property, I believe. And so I'm wondering if there's already been expressed interest from restaurants or stores or any other kind of outlets, or, like what the plan would be for that balance. Thank you.
Okay, well, commercial, it's a permitted use. So Arian, I'll just wonder if you want to answer that question in terms of what's been sort of interest in terms of the village expansion project and commercial uses.
I can just say that then in this survey, there are a lot of people who said they'd love to have some light commercial available in that area. Whether somebody really wants to ultimately do that will remain to be seen. I did also want to respond to Alicia's question about restrictions, because another thing to keep in mind here is that you could never physically fit 20 apartment units on a quarter-acre parcel with the height restriction that is in the parameters that Jesse mentioned. So that's just that kind of stuff that Jesse said, to really look at rule by rule, to sort of think about it pragmatically about how this works. And as a reference point, the 8-unit apartment building, the Heartbreak, that I still own the remainder of it, is about on 0.4 acres for 8 units. And yeah, there's some yard and stuff like that. But, just to kind of keep things in a realistic perspective here, some things aren't possible. So, thank you.
Grace, you still have your hand up or labeled as Grace? Or Michael Billings has a hand up.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Will. I have what I think is probably a thorny question that I, I actually feel a little bit timid to ask, but in terms of zoning as a guiding document, I understand the weight and the importance of that. Is there another layer anticipated? I don't, and Arian may be the best one to answer this, but is there another layer of aesthetic planning that is anticipated for this new expansion from the point of view of not just height restrictions, but the larger question of how buildings will actually look, or how buildings will be, the percentage of building versus lot size, which goes back to the earlier question about the runoff questions and such. In other words, is there a design aesthetic or some kind of minimal set of ground rules being imposed with this new expansion project? That's my question.
I'll just say that it will be going through the subdivision review by the DRB. They may, which would have to do, which would allow the DRB to set landscaping guidelines, shielding guidelines, and that. But in terms of aesthetics, the zoning stays away from that intentionally.
Uh-huh.
As John
Color you
might
want.
say, yeah,
I did
one
not know if the
person's aesthetics is
expansion,
another
if,
not.
if
So
the
Aaron, I don't know
expansion,
if you want to comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, you can still paint your house any color you want in Plainfield. I think that's been the long held position of the Planning Commission. And, we're such a small town that, as Will mentioned earlier, the administration of some of those things, you have these town with all these design guidelines and, how many volunteers we need to run the town as is, Michael, without adding
absolutely.
these on top
Yeah,
of
I was
it.
just wondering, like if somebody wanted to build an A-frame, or if somebody wanted to build some kind of elevated stick house or something, because it's such an experimental and new moment in the town building history, where you have a multiple group of, except if you go back to the very early years of Plainfield Village, where so many units are simultaneously being developed, whether or not there is any kind of sense of introducing an aesthetic. I mean, it's an actually a very thorny issue, but I just, that's why I asked it.
I mean, I think that my understanding is that the plan that they're outlining, takes three larger parcels and then identifies a part of it that's ideal for building on, preserves some surrounding property, and then within that development area, it subdivides it into multiple properties that are then sold to individual buyers. And those individual buyers could be anyone, and they could do whatever they want within the constraints of the zoning regulations on the plot they buy. So if someone buys a 10th acre plot and they just moved here from, I don't know, Will, Arizona, then maybe they want to build an adobe house. And
Yeah.
then on the adjacent plot, maybe it would be a local timber framer and they want to build a timber frame. And then maybe the next plot over is someone from New York City who wants to build a super modern little cube. So I think that my understanding of the plan sort of allows for a mixture of, once the town does the subdivision and then those plots are sold, it's sort of open to whoever the buyers are.
All
That's
right,
my understanding.
that's helpful. Thank you.
John, you had your hand up again?
Yes, sir, I did. That actually brought up another question. But anyway, in I've heard it said several times. Arian here just a minute ago was talking about the lot sizes basically limiting what could be built there. What, and I guess this runs into the new question, what is going to keep someone from buying multiple lots and building whatever the heck they want to on top of it? If I want to buy two half-acre lots and build something on an acre, what's going to stop that from happening? or building a giant, like behind Goddard, apartment building on an acre lot.
I don't see anything that would prevent that, just like every other property in town. Anyone who wanted to could buy any number of properties and build whatever they want on it.
Sure. So there is no
Within the
restriction on
constraints.
that.
Yeah.
Right, within
Correct.
the
Correct. Of
zoning.
course. Of course. That's exactly what I thought. So
Wait. This is Sandy speaking. Sandy Vitztum. I'm the architect helping the group. My understanding is that the town will be the subdivider and the owner, and they will be able to make rules within Vermont statute limitations for selling the lots, maybe even be able to prioritize people who are affected by the flood. They can make rules such as the person must live on the land, whatever. I don't know exactly what the rules will be, but rules can be created about how the land is used after it's purchased.
Yeah, that's a topic of active discussion, and really with the ideal of prioritizing affordability for people who are displaced and affordability for people who want to live in Plainfield. So because the town is going to have some control of how the lots are sold, there will be some additional rules that can be put in place through deed restrictions or otherwise.
Okay, that makes sense.
so
Thanks for that clarification.
the town as a government entity can do those restrictions, because typically that would actually keep them from doing restrictions, being a public entity like that.
If you sell a piece of land, you can put any restriction you want in, I mean, within legal boundaries on the deed. And so that is part of the proposal that's currently being considered and it's a very important topic of interest within the steering committee for sure. And I think is something that we're looking for feedback on at the informational sessions and the upcoming design workshop.
Okay. And my last and probably easiest question is, you keep saying there are currently 11 lots that are at a 10th acre. How many lots are in the Plainfield Village? That's more helpful as to know, to me, if there are 400 lots, that's a tiny percentage. If there are 50, that's a huge percentage.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
I actually wasn't expecting you to answer that, Arian. I figured someone on the board might here know.
You might
I
be
don't
around
know
100.
that offhand either.
No, we
do
can
you,
count
Will?
them, but it's
I just wondered.
probably 100, less than 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's close enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Charlie, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just very quickly, I don't want to quibble, but there is one aesthetic that's in the proposed zoning regulations, and that's the condition of the front yard.
Yeah, okay.
There is a restriction saying you can't park in your front yard. I hate to say it, I am presently in the village district and I'm out of compliance with that regulation. It's a quibble. And I don't want, people going around and saying, in the Vermont tradition that you can't put your cars out front. You've got to put them out back.
That's one of the requirements. The new neighborhood area application guidelines have those as suggestions. And if Karen comes along and tells you can't park your car in your front yard, she probably would never do that. So, it's some of the guidelines that the NDA application asks for have more to do with South Burlington than they have to do with Plainfield.
But
maybe
Yeah.
Levittown.
Yeah, but
By the way, I live in the last subdivision development in Plainfield, which is Martin Meadow.
yes. Okay.
I'm thinking the parking in your front yard is only going to apply to not, I hate to use this word grandfather, but like, pre-existing houses in the village that park in their front yard. That's not going to impact them. It's going to impact the design for maybe for the extent, for the village expansion. I get really bothered by when you get to those little nitty picky things, like where you can park your car and what the color of your house has to be. And I mean, Plainfield's pretty much avoided that kind of oversight. Like when people give me designs for their house that they're building, I only want to know the footprint and the height and the setbacks. You know, that's zoning in Plainfield has really been based on, is it in the building envelope? Does it meet the setbacks? You know, that kind of thing. There's a little oversight for the historic buildings and district, but we typically have not regulated individual choice for what your house looks like. And
However,
I think for
Karen,
us to go into, oh yeah, Charlie and I, yes,
this is in the proposed
Yes, Charlie?
regulations, and it sounds like a guideline. Take it for what it's worth.
Well,
right. But I'm just saying that people are talking about aesthetics and houses and colors and different styles, and I don't want to see row houses that are all the same. You know, I'd like to see individuality just from a resident of the town. So I know it's hard because some people are upset when people paint their house purple, and some people are upset when it's orange or if it's white or it's multicolored. And I don't think we want to go that way in the town of Plainfield to really work on what kind of house you can build and how, you know. So I just am concerned that, you know, we're getting into a different place now that we're talking about designing this villa, you know, this extension. And that, if there was going to be limitations on designs and size, that would be all done during the subdivision regulations and all that stuff. And it would all be predetermined. And if people didn't want people to buy 2 lots and merge them, you can put no merging allowed in the subdivision. Right. You know, like you may not merge lots. I mean, that's one way to keep from people buying 5 lots and making a big apartment building. You know, that would be something to consider. So I don't know. I want us to allow us to be individuals with some sort of regulations that, you know, that we all sort of have to, you know, abide by, but not all have the same color house.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. We're going to have a hearing next Monday where the planning commission is going to hear basically more public input, more questions about the zoning. And then if everybody's, I wouldn't say happy, but can live with it, we're going to send it on to the select board, and it's their turn. And they can make a decision. And then hopefully we get to a town vote. And then if things, you know, I'd like to work with the idea that we change, we make a small revisions on a continual basis rather than a big revision on a long term. And I have to do my NPR fundraising program and say that planning commission needs more members. We need to update the town plan, because if you read the town plan, it's not what the town is now after the flood. And you might not have to do a lot, but or even if you're volunteer to write a section, it would be great. So thanks everybody for coming, and hopefully you can make the next hearing. And if you can't, you can send me my emails on the town website. If you just want to say your thoughts, I can read that at the hearing, so it's sort of entered into the record. And we'll keep this process moving forward.
Thank you, Will, for your excellent lead-off summary. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to get this screen sharing down with more practice. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks
you.
everybody.
All you people are working on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.